Bengals, Vikings, backup quarterbacks, fringe playoff teams. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, football fans? It's time for another crossover here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Jake Liscow from Locked On Bengals. He's Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings for this week's PrizePicks crossover. Vikings, Bengals, like I mentioned, backup quarterbacks, fringe playoff teams. We're going to get into the biggest stories, the biggest matchups, the keys to victory for these teams. And this episode is sponsored by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports at prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Promo code LockedOnNFL will get you a first deposit match up to $100. And you can find these shows, Locked On Vikings, Locked On Bengals, on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. We appreciate every single one of you who make us your first respective listens and all the everydayers out there. And Luke, let's get into some big stories. Backup quarterbacks, changing quarterbacks in Minnesota. I'll let you start. What's the big story for the Minnesota Vikings?
Yeah, so hi, Cincinnati. Things are a lot different than when we looked at this matchup 2 months ago. And since we met last year too, it's dark. The Vikings are starting Nick Mullins, and that's the fourth starting quarterback the Vikings have had this year. They had Kirk Cousins get hurt in week 8. Jaren Hall started the next game, got concussed immediately, lost his job to Joshua Dobbs, who just lost his job to Mullins last week, and now officially they're moving forward with Mullins. So we don't really know a lot about Mullins. We haven't seen him play for the Vikings a lot. I mean, we've seen a lot of Mullins over in San Francisco and Vegas and stuff, but he's fairly new to us as Vikings fans. He's a little bit more stable. I think if you got Dobbs, I'd be telling you, man, like you can really get this guy to mess up and throw stupid interceptions, or he'll be in the grasp of a sack and just wing the ball out. And he threw 2 interceptions to nose tackles in his brief stint as a Viking. Like he'll do that kind of stuff. Nick Mullins has some of that. Like he's not the safest guy. This is not. I've been saying, we had Sean Mannion as a backup for a few years. This isn't Sean Mannion where nothing will happen. He'll still get outside the pocket if there's an opportunity to, and maybe scramble. He's fast-ish, but not that fast. But what's important is that the rhythm is proper with him. He's on time. He's delivering the ball where it is supposed to be. Not a crazy arm, not a lot of talent as compared to guys that are on purpose starters in this league. He's not this dude just dripping with these crazy deep balls or something like that, but like he can throw a corner route. Like he can hit that throw. And ideally we live in a world where this game came down to something else and he just played a little bit of point guard.
Are you expecting then this like heavy play action, screen game, running game kind of approach from the Vikings? Because that's what the Bengals have seen as a change of pace for their offense with Jake Browning.
Interesting. No, I don't think so. Mullins has been trained in the Kirk Cousins offense, so he'll do what Kirk Cousins did, which there's some of the movement stuff and play action stuff, but like they are Kevin O'Connell, as opposed to the Kubiaks who were here, or even like McVay and Shanahan themselves, Zach Taylor, a lot more interested in the drop back game. Just straight drop backs, 5 routes, 5 wide, attacking, middle field safeties and attacking half safeties and trying to sort of whiteboard his way through those games with just drop back stuff rather than the rollouts. They're kind of our version of quick game, where instead of running like slant flat, we'll run a little keeper slide and check it down to the tight end for 3 yards. And that's kind of our easy get into rhythm kind of play, but it very much serves only that purpose. They don't really use it so much as a shot play anymore because defenses are just too keyed into that. Instead, their shot plays are, drop back, maybe play action, but not like rollout play action. And go balls down the sideline or deep post to Jordan Addison, that kind of stuff.
And of course, we'll talk about the return of Justin Jefferson, but I do find that interesting. And
that's really interesting. Yeah.
Something that, just leaning on a backup to just continue to live in the drop back world. To
And
me, watching what has happened when they asked Jake Browning to do that in Cincinnati against Pittsburgh a few weeks ago, and it was just a disaster. And then this total transformation against given schematically very different teams, and the Indianapolis Colts and Jacksonville Jaguars on defense, the Bengals started to live in this under center play action, no more empty. We're going to run the ball arguably more, although if you look only at more neutral game script situations, it's actually the same run pass split, which is something Paul
they were
Dehner
just
Jr.
ahead
of the
of
Athletic
them.
pointed out. But a lot more play action screen stuff from the Bengals, a lot less. We're going to ask the true pass set kind of pass protection, straight drop back game from them, less quick game that you do a lot with Joe Burrow where they go empty. They send 5 guys into routes. That's
a lot
how
harder.
Joe Burrow wants to live. It is a lot harder. So that's why I'm surprised to hear you say that that's how they want to live with Nick Mullins.
Yeah, because that's what Nick Mullins. I think that's more of an O'Connell thing. This is fascinating because these two head coaches have the same dad. They're both off of McVay's staff.
That's why I'm so shocked.
Yeah, and so when you get a different backup quarterback, but that might just be a different. I mean, that's what Jake Browning did a lot at Washington too, right? So like that's just his skill set. Mullins has been in these Shanahan systems a lot, and he's so far shown an ability to like read these things out and get the ball moving. I don't think he throws that well on the run. So that might be the difference is, getting him out and moving him out into the flats and moving the pocket and stuff might not be better for him. He might be better at hit the thing at the top of your drop. And you're just not going to see like a wow, Josh Allen kind of, layer it in over to like, he'll be a little bit safer with it. But right now, because the other headline of the Vikings is that the defense is playing out of its skull. We just kind of want like no turnovers, like just don't do anything crazy. We'll take our, go score 18 points and we'll be fine. Like we'll kick a few field goals. We'll try to win this like back in the day when Mike Zimmer was winning games 16-10. And that might be the way that this team kind of lives down the stretch here is by trying to really like collapse the game and lean on the defense more.
And I was talking to a mutual friend, a guy we both know, Mike Santagata, yesterday about this and saying like, hey, look, if the Bengals can get to 20 in these games down the stretch against the Vikings, Steelers, not so much the Chiefs maybe, but Browns, like against these backup quarterbacks with good defenses, getting to 20, I think is going to be tough. And we'll talk about this defense because I think that's one of the matchups and stories is incredibly intriguing to me this week from a Bengals perspective, going from Gus Bradley to Brian Flores. You could not get more different in terms of the style of defenses that Jake Browning at quarterback and Zach Taylor on the offensive side of the ball are going to prepare for and see this week. But you talk about taking care of the ball. It does not appear to be one of Nick Mullins' strengths. Just looking at the PFF data here, Luke, for what it's worth, they've got him. The last time he played a lot was 2020. So it's been a while, but he has a career turnover worthy play rate at 4.5%, 33 turnover worthy plays, just 2.5% for big time throws. 17.
4.5. That's nothing. That's where we 4.5 for breakfast. I'm not kidding. Like the other two guys are so much more. Jaron Hall, who did this a ton at BYU, and Josh Dobbs, who just threw 4 in a game a couple weeks ago.
So you're happy about that number. Great.
That's the best we got is what I'll say about that number. But turnovers have been the story of the Vikings this whole year. They've fumbled, they've thrown interceptions, they've had games where they turn it over 3 times in the first half and have to dig themselves out of a hole. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and that's kind of where it is. But if they can get through a game without turning the ball over, then they stand a much better chance at success.
The Bengals, one of the top teams in the NFL at turning over opposing offenses, and we'll see how that comes up as a factor this week because I really want to focus on these defenses. I think that it could be a bit of a defensive struggle, although Bengals fans are coming in thinking, man, they've scored 30 in 2 straight games. I think that is going to be tougher this week. So we'll talk about that Vikings defense and what I think is one of the biggest matchups of the game, which is Flores against Taylor, hopefully staying on the sidelines, unlike when Flores was in Miami. And we'll get into those matchups coming up next. This crossover episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's a holiday season, and maybe you don't like getting gifts. Getting gifts is hard. It's stressful. Well, get a gift for yourself with BetterHelp. It's a great time to do that at the holidays. You finish your Christmas shopping, perhaps your Hanukkah shopping, your holiday shopping, whatever the shopping is or isn't, and you want to treat yourself. Therapy could be a great way to do that. If it's going easier on yourself during the tough moments, you can do that too. But if it's therapy that you want to try, BetterHelp makes it incredibly easy to give yourself some love this holiday season. Right now, you can get 10% off your first month as well. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule with multiple modalities and make it easily accessible. So in the spirit and season of giving, give yourself what you need with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/locked-on today. You'll get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked-on.
Today's show is also brought to you by Schultz Jewelers. Schultz Jewelers is a one-stop shop for anything jewelry this holiday season. Maybe you know exactly what you're looking for, the right diamond to pop the question this holiday season. Maybe you're looking for a pendant, earrings, bracelet. They have it all. And maybe you don't know what you're looking for. Well, that's fine, because owner Matt Schultz and his team, they've been in business for 70 years. They've celebrated recently their 70th anniversary. So happy anniversary to them. And they can make that perfect piece for you because they do custom designs as well. We're talking about a modern jewelry store, from unique custom designs to top-rated permanent jewelry. They are a one-stop shop for you. There's no one like Schultz Jewelers. So check them out right now at 2202 Dixie Highway in Fort Mitchell, 5 minutes from the bridge into Kentucky, or online at schulzdiamonds.com. That's schultzdiamonds.com. We know the Bengals strive for perfection. Schultz Jewelers does too, because when it has to be perfect, it has to be Schultz Jewelers.
Luke, one of the most fascinating matchups to me in this game is Brian Flores, and that I think you've called it deranged. At least I've referenced you calling it deranged.
Probably. That sounds like something I would say. I do believe that it is deranged. Yes.
And the style of defense that is blitz heavy, that is disguise heavy, where last week the Bengals picked apart a Gus Bradley defense, ascending four and playing single high almost the entire game. That disparate approach, that juxtaposition, I'm fascinated to see how the Bengals deal with it, because they've been very good this year attacking teams that like to send their defensive ends flying upfield in the screen game with designer runs. Talked about that a lot on yesterday's episode of Locked On Bengals. But we also saw Jake Browning look like a deer in headlights against the Pittsburgh Steelers. A better defense like the Vikings, but also stylistically very different.
Super different. Yeah. So, okay, the Flores, you haven't seen anything like the Flores defense, and you won't for the rest of the year either. It's about 60% Belichick and 40% Pat Narduzzi Pittsburgh Panthers, which Flores got from his year with the Steelers last year. They share a practice field, so we watched some tape and took some ideas from them. But basically, the question of it is, and this is a question I always have for people on these crossovers, what is your favorite blitz counter? What's Zach Taylor's favorite blitz counter? When you see 8 guys on the line of scrimmage, everybody's coming. Quarterback, do they check into something? Is there a hot read? Is it just we're going to call a lot of screens and hope that we can punish that? What's the move?
We've seen that answer change, of course, without Joe Burrow, but I think it isn't one thing. They will be hot at times. They will try to call screens at the right time at times and try to push the right button. But the other thing that they've always got in their pocket, and this is something that I think is fascinating hearing you ask that question, is I'm just going to throw it up to Jamar Chase or T. Higgins on a go ball. If there's nobody back there to help, that's
3-step drop and just heave it. Okay.
There are a few options, I think. And the other one is that occasionally they'll go max protect and try to pick it up. But with a backup quarterback, or I've been scolded for this, a guy who was a backup quarterback and is now starting his third game.
Semantics. He's a backup.
Yeah, well,
he's not on purpose. You didn't want this.
I've been scolded for this, Luke. Those answers
no shame in that.
A little bit from when Joe Burrow's at quarterback.
Got it. So the go route's really interesting. We haven't seen that. We've seen a lot of people trying for the screens and the quick stuff. Let's just hit like a dart RPO, or let's hit something that's 1 step and throw, or 3 steps and throw, slants and stuff like that. The slants don't work as well because they changed a lot of the stuff they were doing on the back end into some zone looks that would pick off a slant. They'll be able to jump a slant.
Guys out, right? Like they're dropping guys into those windows.
Yeah, exactly. So part of a really key thing is when they are in, they call their max pressure formation, that look that usually you only see on third downs, is their Bengal package. And the blitz rules out of that are based on how the offensive line slides their protection. Someone drops out, someone will come. And so you'll have kind of, depending on what the offense does, determines how many people come and blitz. And the idea is that you always have one more than is protecting. So if you do want to do max protect, we're sending 8 people. If you have 7 blockers, right? Or if you have 8 blockers, we're sending 9 for that. Like, that's going to be how those things work. And then people will drop out based on the protection slide so that those like quick windows are still taken. And then you'll have corners playing really far off, eyes on the quarterback, 1, 2, eyes snap to the receiver, and then you're probably breaking on something, because usually guys will throw like little hitches against that. So it's 1, 2 break, or 1, 2 eyes to the receiver, and then you play man-to-man from there. But what could be interesting is if Jake Browning wants to just take that under center 3 steps, throw something up to Jamar Chase, and you're attacking a matchup that is really interesting, and probably one of the biggest ones, which is Jamar Chase versus, I would guess, Byron Murphy, but they might play sides and let Jamar Chase go up against a Caleb Evans, who's a bigger corner, and has been playing lights out, by the way. That would be an interesting matchup to test, but it's dangerous because if you check into that, if Jake Browning says, oh, they're coming, I'm throwing this go ball pre-snap, it might be a max cover look where we only rush 3. And now you got safeties lurking over the top that are going to pick the heck out of that thing.
Right.
So you have to be really, really careful about how you do that. Nobody has really figured out a good, consistent answer to the Flores defense yet. Now that it has really hit its stride and they've kind of worked out the kinks over the first half of the season. But I kind of said on my show yesterday, Zach Taylor's turn to try to figure this out now. He's a pretty good offensive mind. And then Ben Johnson gets a couple cracks and Matt LaFleur gets a crack. So somebody's going to figure something out here, and we'll see what can consistently work.
I do think that it is a challenge just because the answers they've had the last couple of weeks, maybe they aren't there the same way. How are the Vikings against, those designer runs like crack toss, wham, trap, those sorts of things?
All of that stuff gets so much easier because of the fronts that they use, that they will do like, I wonder what front they'll live in. Cause usually they'll base out of either 4-3 or 3-4, and then they'll kind of adjust from there. And it depends. It's a game plan thing. So against those, I'm going to guess that they would want even spacing, but that's super a guess. And then they'll usually either shift into like tilt fronts that are like 6-1. 6 guys on the line of scrimmage, or they'll have a 5-man front and then bring down another person as like an overhang defender. That's a 6th person. So they want 6 on the line of scrimmage, which makes it a lot.
Which we've seen against the McVay tree running attacks, going back to like the Patriots a few years ago, right?
Right. That's the Belichick part. That's the stuff that Flores still has from his days in New England. And it breaks up all those double teams in like zone and stuff like that. But against those kind of designed, tricky trap wham kind of family of things, it also puts guys in every gap. And it makes it really hard to protect the puller. Like if your guard pulls to either do trap or power or whatever it is, it's really hard for that tackle or that center or whoever it is to collapse that gap, because there is somebody in every single gap. So he's got his own thing to do, and now he's pinned down by somebody else. Just having those extra guys on the line of scrimmage helps quite a bit. And the disadvantage is that you throw over the top of it a ton, but it's really hard to do that if we're also sending 7 all the time.
Yeah, I think that is the chess game, and what the Bengals will have to figure out is the pre-snap, post-snap diagnosis, or just putting Jake Browning in a position where he has answers. Something with Joe Burrow that I feel more confident about, right? Because he's so good at processing post-snap and so good at seeing the entire field and figuring out where he needs to go and when, at a very, very high rate of efficiency and accuracy. And then with Jake Browning, we haven't seen him have to make those diagnoses nearly as often. So that's why we just spent 8 minutes talking about that particular schematic chess match, because I think that is such a crux of this game.
Yeah.
I also do want to talk about Justin Jefferson's return and some of the players in this game as well. Ivan Pace Jr., maybe one that you didn't expect me to want to bring up, but a guy that a lot of Bengals fans know and are.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because of the
defensive
Cincinnati
player of the
tie.
week, Ivan Pace Jr. just had the game of his life.
Well, and 2 weeks removed from Jake Browning being the AFC Offensive Player of the Week. So we got some
Let's
undrafted
go. Yeah.
award
Undrafted.
winners in this game.
Tommy DeVito was NFC Offensive Player of the Week this week too.
Really?
Yeah.
What is
Who needs
going
the
on
draft?
in this NFL season? We'll continue with a couple more comments on some of the key players and matchups in this game before we wrap up this week's crossover coming up next.
Today's episode of Locked On Vikings and Locked On Bengals is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And it's America's #1 sportsbook for a reason. That's because if you are new to FanDuel, you can sign up right now at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make one $5 moneyline bet on any team. You can make a bet on Vikings or Bengals. If you don't want to do that to yourself emotionally, I get it. Why don't you just throw it down on, say, the San Francisco 49ers, who are minus 800 against the Arizona Cardinals? $5 on that. And assuming the 49ers beat the Cardinals, which we all expect, you will get $150 back in bonus bets. That's 30-1 odds on a minus 800 bet that you can find at FanDuel Sportsbook. Or you can bet right now the Vikings are 2.5-point underdogs to the Cincinnati Bengals. So if you want to catch that right now, it'd be a good time to bet the Bengals because you get that hook point on the field goal if you wanted to go do that. You can find that once again at FanDuel.com/lockedon. $150 in bonus bets for hitting on any $5 money line bet if you're new, and sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Luke, before we get into what needs to go right for a win, and if you like to do predictions, we can get to predictions. We got to talk about my biggest matchup for an entire segment, so I just wanted to open the floor up to you to bring up any other matchups or players that you're highlighting or interested in talking about this week.
So I'm really excited to see what the Vikings can do with Jefferson. We haven't really seen Jefferson since he got hurt in week 5 against the Chiefs. We saw him for less than a quarter against the Raiders, and then he got hurt again. That did knock him out of the game, but he's already announced that it's not going to knock him out for any more. He's going to play through it. He got an internal bruise in that game and had to go to the hospital to get that checked out. So kind of gnarly, but I guess it heals up pretty quick. So he's good to go. But then my question is, what is the Bengals move for superstar, gotta know where he is at all times kind of receivers?
Yeah, that will be the question this week. The Bengals, once again, without Cam Taylor-Britt, who's on injured reserve. So it'll be a mix of Chidobe Awuzie, of DJ Turner. I don't think there will be a shadow necessarily for those situations when they're not bracketing or clouding Justin Jefferson. We even saw
They'll probably do that a lot, though.
I imagine there will be a lot of that. They haven't. I'm trying to make sure I'm not going to put my foot in my mouth. They haven't played a ton of star receivers this year. They did see Stephon Diggs and the Buffalo Bills, but I feel like they haven't seen that superstar wide receiver a ton this year. And the defense has been very prone to explosive plays. And so that's where Justin Jefferson and even Jordan Addison, even TJ Hawkinson, where they've had issues with tight ends for sure at times, like those guys are a little bit intimidating. But then I look at the Vikings offensive line, and outside of Christian Darrisaw, especially if O'Neal doesn't play, I think that there's some things there that if you just get Nick Mullins uncomfortable off his spot, that's how you want to try to neutralize these weapons that are a little bit scarier that you have to scheme up a solution for if you're Lou Anarumo, who's going to throw a lot at you. He's not going to just do one thing.
He likes his like exotic 6-man rushes, right?
You'll see. Well,
5?
I mean, when you're describing 5 often slot corner stuff with Mike Hilton, often some safety stuff with Jordan Battle and Dax Hill from time to time. Occasionally you'll see some. Yeah. I mean, when you're describing the way Flores likes to send pressure, there's some of that in the Bengal system as well, where they will read rush and drop out if guys stay in and that sort of thing. To
like
try
peel
to
out with running backs and stuff.
Yeah. Stuff like that. You'll see where linebackers will show blitz and then like bluff the blitz and back out, that sort of stuff. But I don't have a great answer for you as far as what they're doing this year. On a consistent basis to deal with that kind of receiver, just because they haven't
probably by design.
Right. Yeah.
Well, so the Vikings offensive line has been lights out this year. which is weird. We haven't had that in a decade, but they've been phenomenal. They're a little banged up right now with Brian O'Neill, who's didn't practice on Tuesday or Wednesday, or estimated not to practice on Tuesday, but also didn't practice for real on Wednesday. So I wouldn't expect him to go. He's got a sprained ankle. That would put in David Questenberry, who is, going to need some help over there with some chips and stuff. But otherwise, with Ed Ingram, who's improved quite a bit, Garrett Bradbury improved quite a bit, and Dalton Reisner, who they brought in the middle of the season, and Ezra Cleveland got hurt. Reisner came in, the Vikings didn't skip a beat, and they actually traded Cleveland away. They were so happy with him. I kind of have disagreed with that move, but it's been a good unit in terms of just straight up one-on-one pass pro. And a lot of the pressure that they've suffered in the last few weeks has been quarterbacks running into it, particularly Dobbs kind of rushing into pressure, choosing the bad rush lanes, ruining his angles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But though I don't put it on them as much, at least lately. But obviously, you put in backups, it all changes.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking at with O'Neal potentially missing the game.
Yeah.
I look at that. But then on the other side, like the Bengals, by far most explosive and disruptive pass rusher is Trey Hendrickson, who's going against a guy who's been fantastic in Christian Darrison. Hendrickson.
Will he be up? Will be he on the left tackle the whole time?
Unless they make a dramatic change of plans to take advantage of a potential backup on the other side, Trey Hendrickson lines up at right end.
That's a sick matchup. That will be must-see TV, I think.
Should be,
because Darrisaw has been he was better last year than he has been this year. I think he's been a little less consistent this year, but like just in one-on-one spots, he's still as good as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
He anchors like crazy. Like anything that's speed to power on him, you can get into his chest and he's one hop and he is down. Like the athleticism and flexibility of it is so crazy. And he'll get in your head a little bit too on the runs, and a little extra shove here and there. He's kind of a mean, nasty guy that plays so physically. I've been saying since I scouted him at Virginia, like Darrisaw takes the fun out of football. Like it just looks miserable to play against him.
Yeah. Well, and Trey Hendrickson,
it'll be an endurance thing as much as anything,
Trey Hendrickson's going to be talking the entire game too. That's going to be
fantastic.
A fun one.
That's going to be so fun.
is known on the Bengals to be one of the better trash talkers, which I feel like a lot of people don't think about Trey Hendrickson enough.
You got to get him on the interior because Bradbury's a hothead and Reisner talks a little bit too. Darrisaw is pretty quiet. He's pretty like head down kind of Terminator style, but the interior guys will have a word with you. So you got to stunt him on the inside, see if you can't get guys to go a little bit too hard, draw a 15-yard flag, that kind of deal. And
interestingly, where I think the stunts will come is going to be on the other side. Sam Hubbard, BJ Hill have combined for a pretty nasty game and twist and power stunt.
And that's the side that struggled with it more.
Right.
So that would be the move.
Right. That'll be interesting to watch. I think that the whole game plan for the Bengals on defense is going to be try to muddy the picture for Nick Mullins, make him think and make him put the offensive line in a bad spot, because I'm not, after the way the Bengals defense stepped up in the run game last week, I have a little bit more confidence in them against a running game. This averaging like the Bengals 3.9 yards per carry does not look to me from the outside to be the most efficient running game to make Nick Mullins have to beat them. And yes, Justin Jefferson can certainly do that, but I think that if they can make it a Nick Mullins drop back and beat us kind of game, that's where the Bengals are going to want to live on defense.
Makes sense. This game is on FanDuel over under 40. That feels high.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Are we taking the over there, like first to 20 wins kind of game?
First to 20 wins. We'll be there for hours.
Maybe even 17. Yeah.
Yeah, first to 17. I mean, it's going to be, here's what I think this game comes down to. You want a key to the game. I say it every time. I sound like a broken record. It's not an interesting answer, but it's the right one. It's turnovers.
Yeah.
Whoever turns the ball over, or whoever protects the ball better, I will say, will win the game. Because, if the Bengals are going to play a lot of aggressive defense, try to generate turnovers, the Vikings have been turnover prone. If I'm walking away from the Vikings with the loss, I'm probably going to foresee that I'm blaming that. But on the other hand, if the Vikings can be safe, protect the ball, and let their defense do what it does, they get really hard to beat.
Yeah. I think defensive struggle in this one, the defensive plays better wins. But the X factor I'm going to throw out there is special teams always can be a real wild card. The Bengals have not had great success punting the ball this year. and they've gotten away with some stuff. Their punt game has not been great. Let's say they've been pretty good in the kick return game, which I know they're talking about changing kick return rules again. But if they have opportunities there to get short fields, like short fields and turnovers are things that you're looking at this week as far as teams taking points out, and Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase getting loose and getting explosive touchdowns here or there. Like these are the ways that the points are. I'm not imagining long, drawn out, grindy drives.
It's going to come down to like specific moments rather than this sort of sustained, like there's a really good chance that like the overall EPA or success rate of this game does not match the results of this game, because it'll come down to, that explosive or that short field when it's hard to move the ball. Otherwise you need to just kind of snap one big one off in any phase.
Or this is the week that Brian Flores defense gets figured out. I don't think
maybe.
But
maybe I mean it's tough with a backup. You're just kind of trying to survive by that point. But
then they scored
some good offensive minds in this league.
Weeks and they're feeling good about themselves right now. They're feeling great about their screen game. But I do think that the stylistic differences on defense are going to be very difficult and something
super interesting.
Going to be fascinating to watch. For more on this game, Locked On Vikings, Locked On Bengals will have you covered both before and after the game. We've got one more show this week, and then we've got post-game shows, of course, as well here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So until then, thanks for listening to this crossover, and enjoy your weekend.